the future existed where you just woke up and walked around a space and the lights responded to you. We've seen that for a very long time. Clearly a desirable experience, but sort of the question was how and was that possible to actually create?
Colin Billings has built something that I'm incredibly interested in general. Hardware that contributes to home automation. You see, he built Orro, the first truly responsive lighting system, out of his own frustration with lighting's adverse impact on his wellness and sleep. Now the Orro Switch adds the computational power of an iPhone XR inside the walls of your home. It detects your presence in room and adjusts the lighting automatically to bring out the most natural light, reducing artificial light exposure, etc., etc. I will let Colin get into all of this, but I think that this is a very interesting topic, especially because I've been focusing a lot more on automating my home now that I actually own one. So I don't want to spoil any more of the conversation. Let's get to it. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Ahoy, the easiest way to increase customer engagement on your WordPress site. Install Ahoy, create a message box, configure where to display it, and start seeing conversions come in. You can create messages for cart abandonment, upsells and cross-sells, custom support, and so much more. Ahoy's flexible conditions let you choose exactly where and when you want your message to be displayed. I've recently installed it on my own WooCommerce site, and I've already seen increased engagement. And I know this because of Ahoy's powerful analytics and reporting. You will see ROI within days of installing Ahoy, if not sooner. And that's even more true for listeners of How I Built It. You can get an exclusive 20% discount on any plan. Visit useahoy.com/howibuiltit and use the code HowIBuiltIt at checkout. That's useahoy.com, USEAHOY, useahoy.com/howibuiltit, and the discount code HowIBuiltIt. Use those today. Increase your engagement and sales on your WordPress site. Thanks to Ahoy for their support of this show. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of How I Built It, the podcast that asks, how did you build that? Today, my guest is Colin Billings, founder and CEO of Orro, the first truly responsive lighting system. When I was reached out to have Colin on the show, I thought this was a fantastic idea. I thought it was a very cool product to talk about. And right now it's really good timing because we just bought our first house and I want to make it as smart a home as possible. So, Colin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Joe. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. So why don't we start off with a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so founder and CEO of Orro. Orro is the creator of the Orro Switch and the Orro home lighting system, which is a seamless replacement for any light switch in your home. Works with your existing bulbs, and you plug it in to where your existing switch is today. And within about a week, it'll autonomously control your lights. That's what we call responsive lighting. And then turn the light switch into something much more than what we commonly expect from our light switches today, which is an easy control for all the other smart things in your home.
Wow, that's fantastic. So something very appealing to me here is that it works with the current bulbs in my home, right? Because other lighting fixtures, you'd actually need to buy these Wi-Fi connected bulbs, right?
That's right. I mean, I think the sort of previous era of smart lighting was really focused around the bulb, and that was sort of easy to install, but very difficult to have across your house. I think one of the biggest problems was that you had to rely on an app to control these bulbs because as soon as you turn off a light switch, the smart bulb becomes dumb. And so, aside from the fact that there are quite a few light bulbs and it gets quite expensive, the experience is just much better with the intelligence of the switch.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that you mentioned is that within a week, it will automatically work with kind of like the way you live. Like, is it AI powered to figure out the lights are always on at this time, let's turn them on at this time? Or can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's two things that are really at the core of responsive lighting. One is machine perception, so it can sort of observe the environment And the other is what I would call machine intelligence, which is not AI in the terms of convolutional networks and other things like that, but more understanding the patterns of your home. And so you use the Orro switch after you've installed it like a normal light switch, and it'll automatically turn the light on and it'll turn it off after you've left. But it's essentially making memories of all those adjustments and understanding your particular preferences for that room and how you use it, and then it can begin actually doing that automatically for you within a relatively short period of time.
That's fantastic. So I think a good illustration of this is every morning I wake up around 5:30 or 6. I go downstairs to my living room and I have a smart switch. And so I say, digital assistant, I won't say any names on the show, digital assistant, turn on the reading light. And then the reading light gets turned on, and then and then I read for about an hour and I turn it off. That's a very specific pattern in my home that, say, the Orro switch could probably learn, right?
That's right. So two things about that. One is that the most sort of transformational thing that Orro does today is sort of move you from that having to consciously think about your lights, right? So everything that's existed prior to Orro was essentially some version of a remote control. You could pull out your phone and make an adjustment. You can connect it to a voice assistant, ask your assistant to do that. Today, with Orro, you just walk in the room, and we've learned that at 6 a.m. in the morning, you like it soft or a particular light on, and we'll just automatically turn that on for you to the right level based on what we've learned about your preference.
That's fantastic. This sounds like something that my father would love to invent, because when I was a kid, the thing that my dad said all the time is every freaking light in the house is on. He would say it constantly because we were always wasting energy, and it sounds like this is the perfect thing for my dad to have circa 1996 when all four of us were running around.
It would have probably saved us all a little bit of grief. I mean, I think two things are really true. Right? One is that we actually waste an incredible amount of energy from our lighting. About half of all lighting energy is wasted because people are not there, or because you already have enough brightness in the room from natural light or other sources. In terms of total energy consumption, that's 1/10 of the world's energy. So it's a massive amount.
Wow.
And it means a lot, both at the world level, but also in your pocketbook over the lifetime that you own a home. So Orro completely eliminates that. I think the important part, and the reason why this is something that is only now possible, is that we don't like to conserve if it means we have to have a sacrifice in our sort of quality or comfort of living. And so what Orro is able to do is sort of understand your patterns and make sure you have all the light you need and that it's perfect for that moment, but make sure that when you don't need it, it's off.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's fantastic, right? Where I'm less likely to recycle if it means I have to take my recycling somewhere. But if my garbage man picks up the recycling, as long as it's in the right bin, fine, I'll recycle. That's no skin off my back, right?
Exactly.
As a kind of crude example, I guess. So this is super interesting. And how old is Orro? Like, when did you found this company?
Orro's about 3 years old now. We spent the first about 2.5 years working product development research, and we launched our first product, the Orro Switch, at the beginning of February.
Nice. Oh wow. So that's really, so it's been 2.5 years in the making. This is perfect. I love hearing about stuff like this because most of the people I interview, and myself included, we are in a very digital space. If I have an idea on a Friday night, I can code the weekend and have it launched by Monday if I really wanted to. But 2.5 of the 3 years you spent doing the research. So let's focus in on there. First of all, how did you come up with the idea?
So the idea really started with an experience I had in my own home, and it was one related to not sleeping well. So I was struggling with sleep. I was recommended an app for my computer called Flux, which adjusts the color, temperature, and brightness of your screens. You have it on your phones now with things like Night Shift, and there's a couple of ones on Android. I started sleeping better immediately, and that was fascinating to me. And I learned through some research that really the way that we expose ourselves to light throughout the day matters immensely to our health. And so I really wanted to build Flux as a hobby project for my home because that's where I spend the most amount of time around artificial light. And that was sort of an interesting technical project to start working on. And so as I started sort of working through what was available, smart bulbs, you talked a little bit about that, are very expensive systems that cost $20,000 for your home. And I was like, I'm not going to do this for my apartment in San Francisco. I think I saw what was an opportunity, which was that clearly, the future existed where you just woke up and walked around a space and the lights responded to you. We've seen that for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Clearly a desirable experience, but sort of the question was how and was that possible to actually create? And so that was the sort of the thesis around where the experience should be. And we started as a business when we realized that the light switch is actually the most widely distributed sort of electronic device in the world. It's in every room. And for 60 to 100 years, it's done nothing more than turn the lights on and off manually. So that seemed like a pretty interesting space to begin trying to build a company.
I love that. The light switch is the most distributed electronic around the world, right? Every home needs light switches. Every home needs multiple light switches, maybe multiple light switches in a single room. So that's really, you're not limiting yourself to like iPhone users or Android users or whatever. You're like, homes need light switches. Every building has light switches. That's fantastic. And then, you saw walking around and the lights kind of change around you. The example of that will always stick with me is from like the 1998 movie Antitrust. Have you seen this with Ryan Phillippe? I
have not, but I'm going to go check it out. I'm a big fan of like finding these old movies where they had things like Orro in them.
Yeah. It was like lights, but also music. Like the music would follow this guy around. And I was like, in 1998, I'm like, this is magic. But now today, I'm like, you could probably do that. So it's really cool to see this kind of put into action. Now, you mentioned a little bit about research, the smart bulbs, like you said, really expensive. We're renting right now. We're going to move into our new house, and that's when I'm ready to bite the bullet. But, if I'm spending, I don't know, it's like $120 for 2 Philips Hue light bulbs. We've got dozens of light bulbs in our house. That's a ton of money. So as far as the research into the competition goes, it sounds like you did that. What kind of research did you have to do to make sure that the Switch idea was viable?
Yeah, I think that, I worked on product sort of teams and in those roles for most of my career. And I knew that, it's very hard to sort of pitch consumer products to customers on things like, value savings, or you really have to have a magical experience that also has the right timing. So we spent a good part of our first 4-6 months just talking to customers and asking them, what is the role that light plays in your life? How do you feel about the jobs you have to do every day to really get that light to meet your needs? What are your desired benefits? Really, I would say that following something like a customer discovery plan is a really great place to start. We essentially did a version of that ourselves, and what you find is that what we found was that people. At first, if you ask, what is the role of light in your life, there's sort of like a little bit of a mental block. But then you ask, what do you do every day? And sort of you go through that process. And I wake up in the morning and I walk down the hall and I turn on the light and then I adjust it down because it was bright from the night before. I'm at my door getting ready to leave and I'm having a moment of like, am I going to turn my lights off and be a good human being today? You find out that it actually touches a whole host of moments across our life. You could really sort of simply think about it. If your light switch doesn't work in your house, you basically go to the hardware store like tomorrow and replace it.
Yeah.
And so we really sort of narrowed in on what those pain points were and like where we could delight people. And then we built a prototype, which was really our sort of validation of like, are we going to commit our lives to this? Let's get something that does an approximation. It was a super ugly product. It like sat on the outside of your wall, didn't replace your light switch, but it did the core components and gave it to people and said, do you like this? Is this something that you could see having in your home? And those were the sort of validation steps that we went through.
This episode is brought to you by Pantheon. Starting a new project? Looking for a better hosting platform? Pantheon is an integrated set of tools to build, launch, and run websites. Get high-performance hosting for your WordPress sites, plus a comprehensive toolkit to supercharge your team and help you launch faster. On Pantheon, you get expert support from real developers, best-in-class security, and the most innovative technology to host and manage your websites. You can sign up a new site in minutes with a free account. You only pay when it goes live. That is my second favorite feature to Pantheon, only to the easy ability to create dev, staging, and live servers and push to GitHub. It's very easy to set those things up on Pantheon. So you can head over to pantheon.io today, again, to set up a free account. Pay only when it goes live. Thanks so much to Pantheon for their support of this episode and this season of How I Built It. If I am in my car and I see into my house that the light is still on, I always have this moment of, am I really going to get out of the car and turn the light off? Which I do because I like saving money. But, that's an experience that we've all had, right? Or like, did I turn, I'm halfway down the road now. Did I turn the light off? I don't remember. So I love what you said here because it's a theme that keeps coming up with people, especially people I talk to in the physical product space. We talked to customers for 6 months or 12 months, or we built a prototype and we asked them these very serious leading questions. Again, the contrast between the physical product and just the software that I can iterate on quickly is different. But I think software developers could really learn a lot from this because no matter what, if you build a product that nobody wants because you didn't do research, you've wasted time. Stuff like this takes time, but you get the right information and you can ultimately build a better product.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, coming from, my previous company was, mobile application space and streaming media, and you definitely had the ability to move faster with product changes. With a piece of hardware, it takes a very, very long time to commercialize something to mass production. So it's a bit harder to steer. So you have to do a lot more work up front. But at the same time, the same principles of sort of more agile development and other things from what you could do early stage with digital products, you just have to sort of find the different way of applying that same approach to the physical product. And so, one of the things that is part of Orro and what we focused a lot on early on and is, how do we make, there's a physical component here that has to control power, it has to connect to the internet, it has to talk to one another, control your lights reliably. That's one vein, but it's actually a very digital product, right? It is much more like a smartphone than it is a light switch, and can be reconfigured to do many different functions and adapt to your use cases in your home. And that was designed sort of intentionally so that we didn't know what the light switch is going to be over the next 10 years. You put an Orro switch in your home, it could be a light switch today, it could be an intercom tomorrow, it could be a security system down the line. And so we built a sort of platform for software to eventually get to that world. The other thing was that we built a ton of sort of data into the product so we could understand how people used it, how it performed. And so that now that we're live and out in the world, we actually sort of understand what priorities are out there in terms of building better experiences.
Yeah, that's really great. So I guess let's get into the title question, right? Which is, how did you build it? And it's I'm going to make this a multifaceted question, right? Because I'm interested in the hardware. I'm interested in the software because in the brief that was sent over, it says that it's like the power of an iPhone XR. And then as a web developer myself, I'm curious about how you built the marketing website. Like, what platform did you use for that? So maybe that's the easiest question to answer here. Maybe we'll get that out of the way now. What was it like building your website, and what kind of, like, was there any headache involved in it?
Figuring out what to say on your website is always the hardest part, right? And sort of knowing how to talk to your customer and how to get your customers, if they're of any type of sort of different persona to the right places on your site is always sort of the sort of seminal question. But what we have done in terms of that stack, I think is something that I would definitely do again, which is we used a product called Contentful, which is sort of a CMS API-based I mean, it's essentially content as a service, right? And so you can, actually put code in there, you can put content in there, and you can call all those different components and reconfigure them. So, imagine sort of in a couple months building something more robust and flexible than a WordPress site or like a WordPress actually for yourself. So the right amount of sort of data structure, but customization to build the site the way you want it to do that. Clearly Google Analytics underneath, and we used a lot of, plugins along the way to just sort of help us understand what we need to invest in, right? So whether it's analytics or other things, I think you can get started very quickly with off-the-shelf things. Customization eventually becomes sort of the battle that you have there, but until you know what you need to customize, like picking something specific is hard to do successfully over time.
Absolutely. I like that a lot. And until you know what you need to customize, picking something is hard. I want to ask one more question around this, because figuring out what you want to say on your website is absolutely the hardest part, especially because you want to tell the right story. You want to create that experience. Did the customer research you do help in writing the copy for your website? Absolutely.
Right. When we did the customer discovery work, and we've done that regularly, every couple quarters, just to make sure that we understand who our customers are. And what we do with those is we actually, tell them that we're going to record the audio, right? And you take, we've done hundreds of these now, and as you start to listen to those things, you actually start to see common ways of describing different things just be present, right? And I think what we really tried to do is lift the narrative, the copy, if you will, from the actual research that we did as much as possible. Now, clearly, you're going to tailor it to be specific and talk about, where your value lies, but use their language. And having those recordings have been kind of, really valuable. I mean, I'm really excited. We're going to go back and run that through something that does speech to text, and I bet you we're going to even see new things come out just from that.
Yeah, that's great. Use their language. It's something that I've really just started to learn this year as I wade more into the digital product space. But using the language that your customers use, or your potential customers, resonates with them, right? They're like, yeah, they're saying the things that I feel. They're describing the very problem that I have. So that's another notch on the research, do more research beforehand belt.
Yeah, I mean, I think a great good example of that is why we call it responsive lighting, right? Because what you had a lot of, it's autonomous lighting, it's, AI lighting, you could go all kinds of different places. But when you heard from customers, they say, what I wish is just my lighting responded to me, right? Not me having to control it or manage it. And so sort of the concept of responsive lighting came, more central for us, just because that's how people described what they imagined the future of lighting looking for them in their homes.
Yeah, man, that's great. I really love that, because AI might have a negative connotation. I've seen WordPress plugins, that's mainly the space I'm in, talk about how it's all React or all Vue or it uses APIs, and I'm like, potential buyers don't care about that. They don't care the tech you're using. They want to know if it solves your problem. So that's a fantastic story about how your customer discovery shaped your language that you used. But let's talk about Orro the product. So it's a piece of hardware that functions a lot more like a smartphone, in that it's very software driven. Let's talk about the software development, but also the manufacturing a little bit, because I don't know a lot about that, and I'm always very curious about it.
Yeah, they're sort of always. So this is my first hardware company, so I learned a lot of this through the process as well. When you're building a device that is basically a computer, or a smartphone is a computer in many ways, there's sort of a number of sort of complexities that come into the design and the choices that you make. Sort of fundamentally it's sort of like what you want it to do and what you want users to experience and what roles do you want it to play. And those are really sort of things that have to ultimately come out, in software. It's not a pitcher of water, right? It does something digital.
Yeah.
And so that was really what I think helped shape our our focus on an operating system rather than something very simple in terms of like C code or something real time only. We also knew that we wanted it to have an interactive capability, so it had a touch screen, and so you wanted to have something that felt modern, just the same way your smartphone does, right? And so that's an operating system that has a GPU. And as you start to sort of walk from the consumer experience, you start to get parts of each of these stacks sort of defined and from a requirements perspective. We knew that we wanted to be able to sense you in the room and not have the problems that motion sensors have, right? And so, we had to find other sensors like microphones that were able to sort of complement motion sensing so that if you're sitting in your room watching Netflix on your TV, your lights shouldn't change because you're not moving around, right? Like being able to combine those sensing capabilities started to sort of define that. And so you sort of worked backwards. We worked backwards from what the customer experience was going to be about and feel like, and sort of that started to give us the framework for what parts of this stack we needed in software and in hardware. We ultimately ended up deciding on Android as the core operating system. We've customized Android. We picked Android because it has all those aspects of a smartphone and operating system, great like motion graphics, complex sort of schedulers and all the things you need to do when you have a lot of different software happening at the same time. It's also something that, because it's the largest operating system, has a great community behind it, making sure that it's secure and everything else. And so, I think we chose to go sort of the open source starting path there because, so much work had been done on it already. And a lot of the big problems, I think part of starting something is choosing which problems you need to solve yourself, right? Versus, something that, you may have a better way of solving it, but the effort of solving it relative to what you can get by leveraging, people who have come before you, I think is a big influence in how much sort of time and cost comes into the equation. And then as you sort of get down, from the operating system level, you sort of get things that are defined by what it supports that type of experience, right? So microprocessors, and then you're making trade-offs on specs relative to what you need.
Right. Man, that's so I really like what you said there about if we look at Tesla, for example, they're reinventing the car, but it still has 4 wheels and 2 doors. They're not changing it completely. They've decided to focus on changing the engine, right?
Yeah.
And I think what you said is great because, looking at your website, it looks like the Orro Switch is about, like you said, lighting today, but it could be about security tomorrow. It could be about controlling the temperature of your home. And if you're starting with something like Android, which has the right support for accelerometers and microphones and other stuff, then you're not spinning your wheels there. And the nice thing about software development is you can iterate later if you don't like the way Android does something.
Right.
And here's how I know that you really thought about this product. If you're watching Netflix and you're not moving, but the TV is still on, you don't want your lights to change because of that. That's just great, right? Because I think we've all been in a situation where like we're in a room, but we haven't moved in a while and the lights turn off and you have to wave your hand and look like a dummy because you want it to come back on. But we're still having a conversation in that room. So I really like that bit of it.
Yeah, I think that what we want to do is really deliver on that vision of I can just walk around my house and never think about my lights again, and then that device that delivers that can become something beyond lighting, and we have a very clear picture of what the next couple of years look like on that, but. This is going to be in your home for 10 years, and it's going to understand a lot about how you and your family use your house. It's going to be in more and more places across that home. And so, what it looks like in 5 years is harder to predict. So build for the ability to be flexible downstream.
This episode is brought to you by Creator Courses. Do you feel confused and overwhelmed by the amount of tools to help you build websites? Are you worried that you are not using the best tools for the job? Do you feel like you ought to spend more time building and less time researching? Like you, I thought I needed to learn every tool, language, and platform under the sun to be a good web professional. And as somebody who's been doing this for 17 years, I can now tell you, you don't. Creator Courses offers short, focused courses, tutorials, and webinars to help you learn the right tools quickly. Then, you don't have to waste any more time researching, and you can get back to producing billable work, confident that you've made the right choice. And now, you can access all of those resources by becoming a Creator Courses member. You'll be able to take any course we offer, including member-exclusive mini courses on how to use specific tools. You'll also join a great community, and listeners can get 15% off the already low price by going to creatorcourses/build. Spend less time researching and more time building. Visit creatorcourses.com/build today. I guess we've already kind of touched, or we're touching on this now, but there are a lot of big plans for the future. So if let's start here. If I bought the Orro Switch today, I'd be able to help control my lights, right? I wouldn't have to think about, after about a week, you said, I wouldn't really have to think about the lighting in my house. Is that the full feature set if I bought it today?
That's the core feature set today. It also works with voice assistants and other things, so you can integrate it to your existing ecosystem if you want. This past Monday, we started our integrations, so you can begin to connect other devices within your home to Orro. We're adding sort of more of those every week, but that is really sort of focused today on sort of control functions within your home. The first one we launched is sort of doorbell integration, so you can hear your doorbell when it rings. Sometimes that's hard to do. You can also digitally mute that in case you have a baby like I do, and you don't want your doorbell to ring. And then that'll become being able to see who's at your door. So we're really starting the integrations of the beyond lighting phase currently. As we go forward, I think that sort of next steps are built-in voice assistants, and whether that's Alexa, and that's probably the first one. It's really a lot of when you think about what you would do to sort of prepare a room in your house for a smart future. Those are fundamentally sensors usually, and then some type of interface, right? And so Orro bundles all of those on top into one switch, and then really through software we expand on that. In the sort of the more distant future, it may be things like security or other applications that sort of help sort of work on the peace of mind aspect of how lighting can play.
Man, that's great. And again, I like the themes that we're hitting here, because the kind of current state of things, or the recent past state of things, is you need to buy more and more hardware to do specific things, right? If I'm looking at I've priced out what my smart home was going to look like, right? And I need to get a Ring doorbell. I need to get, the Nest thermostat, the Philips Hue light bulbs. Luckily, I have a bunch of Echo devices. And it sounds like the Orro is, like you said, this one piece of hardware that's going to be able to do a bunch of things, which I really like.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like a front room in your house and like what you might want to do with that from a smart home perspective. You probably want to buy some type of voice assistant, so it's like an Echo Dot or one of the Google products. That's $40 to $50 right there. Hey, I want my lights to turn on to simulate that I'm home, so that's a timer that's like $15 to $20. Mm-hmm. This is on my street, so I want to know if someone comes through my glass, and so I want a motion sensor, and maybe I want to trigger other types of things in that room based on a motion sensor. All of a sudden you're looking at $120, $130 worth of hardware that you then have to go plug into the wall and find a way to power inside of that room. All of that are sensors that are an existing switch today from Orro.
Yep. That's great. And then the thing you said about digitally muting the doorbell is fantastic, because I have a toddler who still naps My wife was just recently like a night shift nurse, so she'd be sleeping during the day. We wouldn't want the doorbell going off then either. So again, just things that you've thought about or have figured out from actually using / talking to people in their daily lives. I love that. So we've kind of talked about the current state of things. Now, what are your plans for let's say the near future? Like what's coming down the pike?
So we can expand our integration. So you'll start to see climate control, other types of lights. So we'll be able to control maybe your lamps and other things like that. That'll mostly come through integrations. And then later this year, you'll see a couple new products from us on the hardware side to help. I think do two things. One is expand the number of sensors that are in a room. There is quite a bit that can be done from the actual location of the light switch, but not every room works really well with that, or sort of long hallways, and you don't want to buy a switch on both sides of that hallway. You will be a part of that product rollout, as well as other switches in your home.
Awesome, that's fantastic. And you've given us a lot of really great advice so far, but I do need to ask my favorite question, which is, do you have any trade secrets for us?
Trade secrets. I think a trade secret or is just a working principle that always helps is to kind of always, at a regular interval, come back to like, why are you doing this and what's the vision, right? What's your North Star, right? And like, where are you going, within a particular timeline, right? You might have a 5-year North Star, you might have a 1-month North Star, you might have a quarter North Star. And the reason why I say that's important is that, the probably most expensive thing you have that you invest in anything you work on is your time. And so you need to know how to sort of prioritize your time. And that, revisiting why you're doing this and is the thing I'm doing this next week actually helping me towards that, helps you get rid of the things that aren't.
Love that. I love that. I was just saying to somebody recently, you've made a shift in your career when you start to value your time more than money, right? So when you're first starting out in your business, or at least when I was first starting out in my business, I feel a lot of freelance web developers do this. I can either spend $300 on FreshBooks for the year, or I can just write my own accounting software, right? And when I was first starting out, I was in college, so I'm like, I had all the time in the world. Time was super cheap for me. But now I'm running a somewhat successful business. I have a family. $200 or $300 is a few hours of my work of my day now. I will gladly pay $300 a year for FreshBooks if it means I don't have to spend 50 hours writing my own accounting software.
Exactly. So. Your time. If you look at people who are successful, I think you'll always find a time management strategy somewhere in their world. Some people are really keen on scheduling time to work on creative things, or, they're very sort of maniacal about their calendar. Others are just very good at the sort of, hey, I'm going to wipe away. Every week is sort of a new week and I'm going to spend it on the most important things. But yeah, there's just so many hours in a day and so much energy that a person has that you have to try to make sure you're doing the most of what you got.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, Colin, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
You can find us at getorro.com, and that's where the Orro Switch is available for sale.
Awesome. I will link that and several other things we talked about in the show notes. Colin, thanks again so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks so much to Colin for joining me today. Again, I think that this is a really interesting topic because I love home automation. It has a little bit of AI and machine learning. It has building hardware and the whole nine. I love his trade secret, which is, what's your North Star? Why are you doing this? And then figuring out if your actions are going to help you achieve your goal. So I think that's fantastic. I also want to thank this week's sponsors, Ahoy, Pantheon, and Creator Courses. I would not be able to do this without them. My question of the week for you is, have you dove into home automation? And if so, how? Let me know by writing me at joe@howibuilt.it or on Twitter @jcasabona. If you liked this episode, please share it with somebody. Sharing it with somebody helps expand the show and increase the downloads and allows me to keep doing this on a weekly basis. So thank you for that. And until next time, get out there and build something.